Welcome, welcome everybody as you're rolling into the Authentic Growth webinar. We're delighted to have you joining us today. We're going to give all of our guests just a moment to click through and arrive and land in this digital room with all of us, and then we'll get started. So take a moment to grab your notebook, get settled, get ready for a fun conversation. I also want to point out that in your webinar controls, you should see a Q&A feature. So please be thinking as we roll through today's discussion about any questions that you would have for our panel at large or an individual member of our panel. We're hoping to leave some time at the end of today's webinar to take some of your questions. Make sure you get as much value as possible out of our time together today. So again, welcome to Authentic Growth webinar. Today, I'm your host, Jennifer Zick. I'm the founder and CEO of Authentic. We are a fractional CMO firm that helps great businesses to overcome random acts of marketing and confidently move forward toward healthy growth. And today I'm really delighted to share this panel with my colleague, Mark from Authentic, and two of our partners from Sales Acceleration. We'll be making introductions soon so you can get to know each member of today's panel. But first, for those of you who are potentially new to Authentic or new to this webinar series, I want to offer a little bit of context of what you can expect today. So as I mentioned, Authentic is in the business of marketing leadership on a fractional basis, and the clients that we work with are small to mid-sized businesses. So most of the businesses that we serve are somewhere between 5 million to 100 million in annual revenue. They are across every business model, B2B, B2C, channel, distributor, and a whole range of industries. And so as we speak today, I want you to know that from the seats we sit in, we're coming from the perspective of working day to day with executives and revenue leaders of these SMB companies, small to mid-sized entrepreneurial businesses. And my guess is that if you're here today for today's topic, you probably work within an entrepreneurial business, and you might even embrace an entrepreneurial operating system like EOS or something similar in that operating system world, which maybe is why you're curious about today's topic. But even if you're here from a different kind of business environment, like a large enterprise, or maybe you're an independent consultant, or maybe you're on the agency side, whatever your role is, we hope that you get something valuable and actionable from today's conversation. And we hope that you'll come back and join us again for future webinars and other opportunities to learn and grow together, because that's the journey we're all on. So without further ado, I'm just delighted to have the opportunity to introduce you to my esteemed panelists. And I don't know how they're showing up on your screen, but I'm going to move to my right, other right. Oh, there we go. Kelly, from my perspective, I'm pointing at you first, Kelly. So why don't you share a little bit about who you are and your background so people know what you're bringing to the table today.
Thanks, Jennifer. I appreciate you having us on today. So I'm with Sales Acceleration. I am the visionary for that organization. In addition to that, I'm an active advisor with Sales Acceleration as well. Sales Acceleration has over 185 active advisors across the country and in UK. And we really service the same market, Jennifer, that you're talking about, that SMB market. We really work with founders, business owners, sales managers, that are looking to build a path to more sales. And there's a variety of ways that we can do that. And we're excited today to just talk about some of those ideas and how our folks might help. My background is I've been doing this my entire career, which is over 25 years. And so I'm just excited to share what I've learned with your audience, and appreciate you having us here today.
Thanks so much for being here, Kelly. I'm going to move next to Tom.
Thanks, Jennifer. Yes, Tom Gardner. I am the Chief Community Officer with Sales Acceleration as well. And I've been with the Sales Acceleration in an advisor role for the better part of the last 6.5 years or so. But I've been in sales and sales leadership for my entire professional career, so the better part of the last 25 years or so. And so I'm excited to be a part of the panelists here today with the rest of the group. Thanks, Jennifer.
Awesome. Thanks so much for being here. And last but not least, Mark, over to you.
Yeah, thank you. Well, hi, everybody. Mark Corona. I am the Chief Development Officer for Authentic. And I just joined, gosh, it's been a month, but just a little over a month, Jennifer. Sort of deep into it already. My background has been over the last 12 years as a fractional Chief Marketing Officer I didn't actually start my career in marketing. I started in sales though, which I thought was a great benefit. And it was in a tech company that grew 100% 6 years in a row. And so as soon as we didn't grow 100%, I thought something was wrong, right? I thought everybody should grow 100% annually. So I was spoiled and then spoiled by that. And then I went to work for a global 3 information company that grew 1% annually. And I'm like, what's wrong with these guys, right? So my early experience has totally biased my perception towards growth, but it made me really interested in helping businesses grow successfully and profitably.
Awesome. And that's fun. My career actually started in sales as well. So hopefully that gives us a little added dimension for today's conversation. For those of you who might have just rolled in recently and didn't hear on the front end of today's webinar, I want to remind you that we have a Q&A option. You should see that in the navigation bar. We would love for you to throw down any questions that you might have for the panel at large or for any of us individually. We hope to have time toward the end of today's conversation to draw in some audience questions. So please feel free to use that Q&A and I will keep a side eye on that so we can make sure to make some room for that. But let's go ahead and jump right in. So as I already kind of teed up, today's topic is about the benefit of operating system type structures down into the sales and marketing functions of the business. So many of the people on this call are probably familiar with the idea of a business operating system like EOS, the Entrepreneurial Operating System, or similar structures for running a business. And I'm assuming that some of the folks that are attending today's event have seen the impact that an operating system can bring to an overall business for creating alignment, documenting a vision, giving everybody focus and clarity on where we're aiming and where we're hoping to go and what success looks like and who's accountable for what. But in my experience, having run businesses with EOS for the last 15 years and seeing the power of a tool like that, I also have been through cycles in my own businesses and now with many clients where once you get the operating system in place for the business and you start to move into departmental rigor, sometimes new gaps appear and you start to recognize that maybe that same kind of rigor could be helpful departmentally. So that's what we're going to talk about today is how sales acceleration and Authentic are helping to address those specific departmental needs. And I know at Authentic, many of the companies that we work with do run on an operating system, but some of our clients don't. And what we're able to bring to the marketing side of the house is still relevant, even if they're not running on an operational system as a company. So just to set the table for all of our attendees. So Kelly, let's talk about overall growth because we've all spent a lot of time helping businesses in that space. And we've seen a lot of common challenges around growth, especially in the entrepreneurial businesses that we serve. Where do you see some of the primary places that these businesses stall out? And are there any early indicators that maybe you're facing a stall out in terms of overall growth?
Sure, it's a great question, Jennifer. So, some of the common things that we find are stalling growth is just the owner is wearing too many hats. They're trying to be the CEO, but they're also in a lot of cases trying to run the sales team, maybe operations too, and they're just spread too thin. So that's an early indication that, someone really needs to be more responsible and sitting in that seat on a more regular basis. The other thing is they often lack experience in sales. A lot of our founders or entrepreneurs are really great with their product. They were never trained in sales. They may be a great salesperson themselves because they're so passionate about what they're doing, but they don't have the ability to cascade those skills down to the rest of the team. They're just not good at sort of translating what they can do with a customer down to anybody else. And they often are frustrated with salespeople. A lot of times too, Jennifer, we see a sales person who was doing great got promoted into the sales manager role and then they're struggling because it's a completely different skill set. And in family owned businesses, a lot of times the brother, the sister, the cousin, somebody is trusted to run that division, but again, never really had any formal training or experience. So those are pretty, more people oriented reasons that we might see growth stagnate. But also, if say we've got the right person in the seat, a lot of times there's just an unclear sales strategy, and that's where a sales system can really help. They may have unrefined messaging. They may not have, good targeting on what they're trying to do as a team. And so sometimes that can stall growth. They've kind of gotten so far with their charm and their salesperson, swag, and then they just kind of peter out because there's, at some point you have to really be able to sell value and have a strong value proposition, be able to communicate that and close the deal. Couple other things, just role responsibilities and clarity. Even in the sales team, you could have somebody that's account managing, their inside sales, and then they're also supposed to do business development, so now how am I supposed to prospect and find time to do all of that when I'm doing all these other things? So just bringing clear roles and responsibilities can help. And just making sure if you truly need a business development function that you're freeing up that person to do it and having the right skill sets, because obviously to cold call is very different than an inside sales order taker type role. And then, the biggest thing I think in a system that we try to implement is just having accountability. What are our goals? Not just metrics, and obviously how many calls and emails and meetings and things like that, although many companies don't have that or goals at all. So we want to have a scorecard per se in our system, but also just a regular cadence of meetings, what we need to accomplish in those meetings, and then having individual goals as well, not just departmental, but really bringing it all the way down to the salesperson level so we can improve their performance, because a lot of times they need that individual coaching, and that's something that's often lacking.
Absolutely. So much of what you encapsulated in those examples, Kelly, rings true for us on the marketing conversation side of growth too. And Mark, I wonder if you could speak to the times that you've been called to the table as a CMO, fractional CMO and advisor. Where have a lot of these companies been experiencing growth slowdowns, or they're seeing that growth could be slowing down and they're bringing marketing into the conversation?
Well, I think even the smallest businesses tend to be have some metrics that they run to, right? When founders are in the business for many, many years, their experience basically has taught them that there's probably one or two metrics they can watch that sort of tell them the business health. It's sort of like they don't need 50, right? They certainly don't need 100. But hopefully the business does have some metrics, because I like to think of metrics as sort of leading indicators of looming financial issues, right? And so if you're not, if all of a sudden you're not seeing new customer acquisition at the rate it was, if your core business seems like it's under pressure in terms of margin because competitors are sort of eating into your space, there's usually something internally or externally that's like a yellow flag. And then I think it's really important that management digs in. I think, Kelly, to your point, I think it was either the SBA or the National Federation of Independent Business did a study years ago that said 80% of small businesses fail because managers don't have the time to manage, right? And so that's sort of like you need to have a process and a structure so that you can get people sort of working on not just the short-term current issues, but the longer-term opportunities at the same time.
Yeah, Mark, I'd like to piggyback on that, because a lot of times in the sales world, we see a lot of lagging indicators. How many deals did you close? And that's the bottom of the funnel. And we really need to make sure we're working with teams all the way up to the top of the funnel where you start, but also, where the salesperson or the conversation begins, and, really looking at, again, how many of those early business development activities and conversations are we having that can lead down to the closed business. So just helping business owners understand those different leading and lagging metrics and how important they both are to watch.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I work with a manufacturing company. They got a new CEO. He was a sales executive. He was a great guy. And then he asked me to sort of dig into some of the sales numbers. And when I did, I found that their average order size was $4,000. And everybody else thought it was $40,000. I'm not the brightest mathematician in the world, right? I barely passed calculus in college, but I know the difference between 4,000 and 40,000 after checking my math, right? And it was kind of like, well, guys, and then of course, what that led to is a deeper dive into it. And we found that, some of the account executives were quoting business that they should have just walked away from. It wasn't going to be profitable business. They were, and one account exec tried to teach them to be more strategic in the selling. He goes, I don't have time for that. I'm too busy writing estimates. Well, it's like, okay, what's your close rate on estimates? Well, you can guess it was awful, right? So,
Well, we're about to move on to the next topic, but I'll just add that I think it's interesting to observe in the 25 years that I've been in sales and marketing and in various kinds of consulting with client roles, how tempting it is for so many businesses at all stages of growth and maturity to get comfortable during cycles of easy growth. You know, when the sales are coming easily and things are clicking, is when they tend to take their foot off the gas as it relates to keeping an eye on trends in the market, keeping the voice of customer close to them so that they understand how needs might be changing, so that they're continuing to innovate and they're continuing to be in touch with what's really happening in the market. Because we see a lot of businesses who think that they're really healthy until the economy slows down, right? And what is the analogy I heard recently? Like, you can, when the tides go out, you can tell who's actually been swimming naked. The tides have gone out in this past year for a lot of businesses, and the ones that are experiencing like sudden stops are wondering what could have they been doing in 2022 potentially to set themselves up for a better 2023 into 2024. So it's interesting just to be conscious of the things that businesses need to attend to continuing growth. And in addition to, you know, those kind of growth levers, there's the people aspect of the business. So Tom, I'm coming to you with this next question because I confess, as an owner and a CEO, I'm so close to my own business. The people part is hard. It's hard to get right. It's hard to know for sure if you're hiring a rock star or somebody that's not going to fit, right? So especially in sales and marketing, I find that entrepreneurial businesses have a really hard time there. And I can raise my hand as someone who relates, because if you are the founder and you have been the head of revenue to start the business engines going, it's hard to let go of that vine and to know how to bring people on board into alongside of you and into leadership and into execution there. So why do you think so many companies struggle in this area? And like, what are some of the ways that they could increase their odds of success?
Sure, Jennifer. And some of this will tie directly back into what Kelly and Mark were just referencing too. And the people part can be very hard. But what magnifies, I think, that challenge is really the system or the structure or lack thereof that surrounds them, right? So start perhaps even at a high level, the goals. What does the company want to accomplish, and have those goals been communicated to all the different parties that are involved? And you move into, strategy as an example. So if we're talking about growth, where's that growth going to come from? Is it from existing customer and expansion, new products, or are we looking at new customer growth that's going to contribute to that? And what are the roles that each of the people on the team need to play? I mean, is there role clarity? Who's responsible for that net new growth? How much are they responsible for? And when are they responsible for? So role clarity and expectations really can come and be a critical part of that. And then, as you mentioned, hiring and bringing people on to the team, as those roles really are clarified, what is that hiring plan? And I see a lot of companies struggle with this because they really don't have a hiring plan necessarily. They're looking for a salesperson. But that salesperson, as Kelly mentioned, there's a different skill set for potentially net new business growth and that prospecting effort compared to a well-skilled account manager for growing those existing relationships. So based on the roles that companies are hiring for, what does that ideal candidate profile look like? What are those skills that you're looking for to position that role for success? How are you going to identify those skills? How are you going to attract those candidates? Are you working with a sales-oriented recruiting firm, as an example, to help bring some of those candidates to the forefront? Are you utilizing assessments to help dive into those skills and get to know the candidates as best you possibly can through that interview process? So that thorough hiring plan and transitioning to onboarding plan. How are you going to set that team up for success as they start that first day, first week, first month, first year within that organization? So what does that onboarding plan actually look like to position that salesperson for success, as an example? And as you start to look into some of the other comments that Mark and Kelly had made here just a few minutes ago as well around that system, Are you setting an environment up where you are creating that feedback opportunity to look at those skill set gaps and providing training opportunity for those people to position them for success? Are you measuring your process all the way back to the goals that we started this conversation with, those leading and lagging indicators, and how are you measuring that progress? And so as much as the people are such a critical aspect of this, what surrounds the people and positioning them for success is equally as important in this case as well, in my opinion.
Absolutely. On the marketing side of the house, Mark, I'm sure you've seen this happen plenty of times too. Like, in fact, the entire category of fractional CMO was really born out of recognizing that a lot of small businesses get it wrong often when it comes to making the right hires at the right time to staff. And I think while there's a lot of confusion that I see with clients on the sales side of structuring a sales org, like what is the difference between biz dev and account management or customer success, like all those roles that work to bring in and retain revenue, but they have very different skill sets. There's confusion there often, especially in a small business. There's massive confusion on the marketing side of the world as well, because 20 years ago, marketing was more of a supporting role to sales. And today, marketing is a collaborative role. We'll talk more about that. But a lot of small businesses get it wrong because they're looking to hire a magician unicorn marketer who has 2 to 3 years of experience and who can do everything from embroider logos on a backpack to like set the strategy for the business. It's just not realistic, right? So Mark, what have you seen on that side?
Well, I want to reinforce and expand on a point Tom made, because, when you look at, we typically all look at resumes, if we've hired, but today's resume is really LinkedIn, right? Nobody even needs a print resume. But the point beyond that is, what I've learned, and maybe the hard way, is that you have to look beyond skills. You have to look at personal attributes. Because what makes somebody successful in one job may cause them to fail at another job, right? Kelly, you said that when you talked about salespeople becoming sales managers. Those are very different attributes, right? And, I remember years ago, we had a huge enterprise relationship. The corporate offices said, hey, we've got a great enterprise sales guy. You can have him for 6 months, and it's like, great, so the guy showed up in, 3-piece suit, all buttoned up and whatever, and he failed because he was not a risk taker. He didn't have any initiative. He wanted confirmation of everything that he was going to do and say and whatever. And it's kind of like, wait a minute, this doesn't work, for somebody in that kind of a role. A lot of marketing executives have sales backgrounds. I don't think that's a bad thing. But, marketing has become a very complicated discipline all in itself, right? And nobody can say, well, I'm good at everything in marketing anymore. There's just way too many pieces for anybody to make that claim. So I think that I've learned that it's really about attributes. That's where you really need to look. Do people have? I think in every job description should have a set of 5 or 6 or 8 attributes attached to it, right? These are the things that we want somebody to be really good at, that are sort of built into their personality.
That's awesome. And that is a great setup for the next question that I'm actually going to put back in your court to start with, Mark, because you just acknowledged what's absolutely true, that, and especially over the last 2 decades, marketing has become increasingly complex and micro-disciplined. There are hundreds of different kinds of capabilities that even a small business needs to know how to draw upon, either on an as-needed basis or as an ongoing basis, to run a strong, modern marketing engine. But the other difference is that when I first started in my career in sales and marketing, marketing was very much the team that made things look good and sound good, right? Content and imagery, it's look and feel, polish it up, very much a supporting role to sales, which really owned and drove every aspect of the client engagement and relationship. That is not how the world works anymore. And so marketing has become a true peer in the revenue organization, but yet many small businesses are still led by people whose frame of mind is 20 years ago. And when marketing is reporting as a supporting function in the business without a seat at the leadership table, I like to say it ends up becoming the junk drawer of the organization. Does something not have a home? Give it to marketing. Somebody needs to order a lunch. That's marketing. That's a really good way to make marketing not work well. So Mark, from your experience, how do you align sales and marketing leadership and roles to really be effective in today's modern business?
Well, I think first of all, you have to grant the fact that they're both critical, right? And one can't be subservient to the other, right? I mean, I talked to a large customer at the last large company I worked at, and I went down to Orlando because we were having some problems servicing them, and I wanted them to have some in an executive sort of presence, right? So we could talk about the real big issues. And like the CEO said, "Why are you here? You're marketing, you make brochures." Right? And this wasn't that many years ago, right? It's not 20 years ago. It's like, oh, okay. But I mean, even really 20 years ago, there were articles being written about marketing as the growth champion. And there's a great article I loved that talked about 6 different stages of value that a marketing organization can play in a business, all the way from service provider to sales, all the way up to driving the business growth, right? Being the primary having the primary responsibility and accountability for corporate growth. So I think everybody needs to kind of get around their heads around what role do you want marketing to have in your business, right? And that's typically an exercise where the executive team's got to get on the same page. Not to ignore sales, because obviously they're all part of building the same revenue stream with different responsibilities, right? But if people seem to understand what sales roles are, they don't understand as well what marketing roles can or should be.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Yeah.
Jennifer, I'd like to chime in too, because a lot of times we see we see owners think the answer is to hire a salesperson, but they have no marketing efforts. So the lift for that salesperson is extremely heavy. They're getting no marketing support at all. There's absolutely no lead gen. There's no social media. I mean, it's cold calling, and it's what I'll call the old grassroots, get out in the community and hope somebody's going to refer you business and cold call. And so, I think sometimes owners think a salesperson is the answer, where really if they could just invest in marketing and generate leads for themselves, they can close, enough of that business to sustain, and then again, ultimately hire a salesperson. But to ignore marketing is a big mistake that we see a lot of times in these small businesses.
Yeah.
I would love to double click on that statement, Kelly. We see that all the time. And what's interesting is that most businesses, just by nature of being entrepreneurial, unless their founder is a marketer, what usually happens is the founder has a great idea, has a great solution of some kind, right? And you grow with this hypothesis, you bring it to market, you're founder led, you have to be sales driven, because until you've sold a few things, you don't exist as a business, right? So founder led, sales led companies are how companies get off the ground. But in the process of doing that, they are committing random acts of marketing all over the place, because every sales rep is out there mavericking their way through, having to be a micro marketer too, and creating their own decks, creating their own sell sheets, doing the things they need to do to lift the company. And if the company goes too far with being only sales driven, you're building a really expensive model where in order to grow, you're adding bodies for every piece of scale, right? And then you're exponentially increasing that maverick risk of diluting your brand and confusing the market. So that's where we really see that tipping point of when companies have reached critical mass and they're starting to recognize that if they don't bring strategic marketing in, the money they're spending to do the things they need to do, like having a website or sponsoring or doing things, is getting really diluted, and there's no way to measure the effectiveness of it or to scale it. And
Yeah.
just
And the
adding
cost, the cost of turnover is so high. So you go back to what Tom talked about, and not having a hiring plan, and not having the right onboarding, and you just get this revolving door of salespeople that are not being successful. Take that money and invest it
Yeah.
elsewhere.
Absolutely.
Kelly, there used to be a number that was tossed around that it cost between $1 million and $2 million to replace a salesperson, because of lost opportunity sales, lost customers when somebody moves on, the cost of hiring, the cost of cutting somebody loose. That's pretty expensive when you think of it, right? Even if it's not $2 million, it's still a lot of money that you've invested. And I think the loss of momentum is also pretty critical when you don't have people out working your customer base.
Yeah, I mean, Mark, I had a client who had a salesperson for 5 years, and they were bringing in $100,000. So the client was like, well, they're paying for themselves, right? because they weren't paying them that much. But then
Yeah.
when they finally replaced that person and the person brought in $1 million in the first year, look at the opportunity cost that they were foregoing by just holding on to somebody that wasn't really performing. Crazy, right? Just
Absolutely. So let's get into the meat and potatoes of our topic today. I want to talk about operating systems to address some of these challenges in sales and in marketing and in the collaboration of the revenue engine. So our two firms are unique in the sense that both Authentic and Sales Acceleration provide fractional and advisory leadership to stand in that gap of where there might not be a sales leader or a marketing leader because either the founder's been playing that role or somebody else, or nobody's been playing that role, whatever the case may be. We provide that leadership, but we also have methodologies and operating systems that underpin the way we work with businesses. And Kelly, I would love for you to speak a little bit about how Sales Acceleration leverages that toolkit to in both in the leadership, but in the ongoing management. How do your clients embrace that to help them drive performance in sales?
Sure. So, obviously there's a lot of things that we can do with clients where we go in and we are acting in that outsource or fractional VP of sales role. But we have another offering, which is our sales system. So that's the Sales Acceleration Framework. And that's really putting that systematic program in place for that business owner that exists when we're not there. And that's, what I think a lot of business owners are looking for is give me the tools and the framework that I need to be successful. So when we work with a client to implement the Sales Acceleration Framework, it's a series of foundation building days with the sales leader and the sales team. So we are bringing it, all the way down to the team member level. And we over those first couple of days, we're building out what we call the sales blueprint. So that's, getting aligned on the goals, not just the key metrics. Obviously, we talked about scorecards, but also just departmental goals and then individual salespeople goals. Where do you need to improve and really understanding the gaps in the organization. We do a sales assessment to really uncover why are they not growing. We get very granular on those reasons and then help them build a plan, either with or without our help. And they can certainly, do this on their own once we help them identify all of that. But throughout this framework, we're, building all of those sales strategy elements with them through workshops. So really putting together their sales stories. And after we do those first few days, they get a full sales playbook from us. So that is sort of the big deliverable. And then they're left with a quarterly framework for meetings and accountability and reset. I mean, we have role plays, we have sales training, sort of all those things that we're able to kind of come in with the client on that initial front end building piece, but then just stay with them once a quarter to keep them on track and to continue to build those skill sets. So it's been really exciting. It's a newer offering for Sales Acceleration to roll out in the market. And we're just having a lot of fun being able to sort of bring this system to our client base.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Well, a little background on Authentic is that, like I said, I've worked inside of businesses that have leveraged EOS, the Entrepreneurial Operating System, for the past 15 years. My former employer was one of the earliest adopters of EOS. And when we in that company were implementing EOS, I was learning how EOS was working for the organization, but I was also the head of sales and marketing. And I had to learn how to take the concepts of EOS and take them deeper into the marketing organization. And EOS is such a great anchor point. If you use EOS, you're familiar with the VTO, the Vision Traction Organizer. There's a little box on it called Marketing Strategy, which is such a great place to anchor with your 3 uniques, your niche, who are you targeting, your guarantee, your proven process, but it is not an actionable marketing strategy and plan, right? And so that was a lot of the inspiration behind the beginning of Authentic is I really want to help entrepreneurial businesses not only fill the leadership gap that they have, because we are usually the first marketing executive in that business, but also teach them how to think about marketing, teach them how the pieces stitch together in today's modern marketing framework. And I'll make sure that in the recap from today's event, we include a couple of resources because this is an ugly prop here, but our marketing authentic growth roadmap is a tool within our methodology that really is used to elevate the IQ of the organization about what is marketing, what are the roles that have to stitch together between the C-suite, all the way into the strategy for marketing, all the way down into the execution of it, right? So that we can take that journey with them in a way that instills that fabric in their organization long after our work as their marketing leader is done. They have the cadence of meetings like you spoke about. They have the quarterly workshops. They have the clear accountability. They have the right people in the right seats so they can keep moving and keep scaling and keep growing. So as you can probably tell in my voice, I'm such a huge believer in systems and structure, because that when you have that structure in place, you have the freedom to be as creative as your business needs to meet the market that you're working within. So
Yeah, and we're
Go ahead.
huge fans of EOS. I think that, if you're running on EOS, if you're a company that's already doing that, good for you. I love it. I ran it when I owned my own manufacturing company, and I'll forever be grateful for how it enabled us as a company to, kind of get organized. We want to run the sales system complementary to that, right? If you're on EOS, we're going to keep that terminology and just kind of plug those, like you said, those pieces that are missing in the depth, where just the framework itself, it's sort of lacking. How do I build the sales team skills? That's what we're really trying to do here over time, is to make everybody better and get that revenue engine really humming.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, Tom, this next question I'm going to tee up for you, because I'm sure that there are guests in the room today, whether they're running on an operating system for their company or not. They are here for this topic because they recognize they probably have some foundational work to do in sales and or in marketing. And maybe they're not ready yet to bring in an outside fractional leader or another formal system. But what are some initial steps that they could take to just start thinking differently about structure foundation for their sales organization? Where would you recommend they start?
Sure. Jennifer, in thinking of, that starting point, that's usually one of the biggest challenges, right? Where do I even begin? There's a ton of really good free tools, checklists, things that can really help business owners get clarity to where that beginning point may actually be. So if you're struggling with finding some of those tools, the salesacceleration.com website has a resource center there that can help you with some of those checklists. But as an example, there's think of, and this is circling back to what Mark had mentioned earlier, but with the customers and the types of business that you're pursuing. Take a deep dive into your customer base. Look into who are your best customers, what makes them your best customers. And a lot of times people may naturally just go to the top large revenue generation or the revenue component of that. But what are the other characteristics that are really tied to that relationship that make them your best customers? What industry are they in? What geographies, if that plays a role? And what are the characteristics that come along with this? What's the relationship and the partnership like? Are there referral generations that mutually serve both you and your customers? So what does that relationship really look like as you're starting to define who are your best customers? And you start to take that step to, how do you attract more of those types of organizations? What's your plan to go forth and not only bring awareness to, but then ultimately acquire more of those relationships to build out your customer base? And so as you start to really take that deep dive into your customer territory planning, the specific types of intentional new relationships you're looking to establish, you then start to forge the strategies and then the people part of things that we were talking about earlier, but really leveraging that knowledge around who are your best customers and why.
Mm-hmm. That is so valuable.
Yeah.
And Mark, how would you weigh in on that as a marketing leader?
Yeah, well, I think the idea of an ideal customer profile or an ideal client profile or an ideal relationship partner profile is critical, right? You have to have a scorecard before you go out and evaluate and waste your time talking to people who are never going to be the right kind of partner for you or the right kind of customer for you. And, when you look at if you try to build your ideal client or customer profile based around demographics, it only gets you so far, right? It's like, okay, there's, 23,000 private equity companies in the US. What does that do for you, right? Not much. I mean, you can pare it down. I think it's the qualitative aspects of the relationship that are important, right? Not even just revenue, because, I don't know. I actually had a job where I got to fire Walmart as a customer, And it was one of the most fun things I ever did, right? It's like, because they fire everybody else. It's like, I don't think they ever got fired, but we had such a good system. We knew that we were not making money on that relationship. So it was as much sort of level profitability as it was, oh yeah, they're a big customer, right? And once we looked at that and we realized they're never going to pay more and they're never going to moderate their appetite for free service. Like, why do we have them as a customer? We're losing multiple millions of dollars a year on this relationship, right? And so I made that call and I said, 6-month notice, we're terminating your relationship. And they're like, what? It's like, yeah.
You got to be brave. You have to be brave to build a healthy business. And I think when it comes down to like, where do you start? Sometimes I think it's important to recognize that a lot of entrepreneurial businesses have grown to a certain critical mass by being all things to all people, because you're trying on a lot of fits. You're finding out where your solution is the best fit. You're finding out which kind of clients are the best fit. But maybe along the way, you have forgotten to stop and ask those questions like quantitatively. Like, hey, let's look at our customer list. Let's look where we have risks. For instance, do we have 3 big anchor accounts that represent 80% of our revenue? And if one of them leaves, we're going under and we're overstaffed, right? Like, where are our risks? Have we become a business that the market wanted us to become and told us to be, or are we becoming the business we want to be, where we're serving our highest purpose in the world and we're growing in a healthy way that supports the kind of culture we want to be and helps us all thrive and do our best work, right? So some of those things that I would encourage companies to look at and ask themselves, can you answer the question of, what is my cost to acquire a new customer? What's the cost of acquisition? Do I know the answer to that? What is the average length of our sales process to get to a win? Is there something we can do to tighten that up? What is the average deal size? Mark, you pointed out a huge gap in understanding between a $4,000 and a $40,000 average deal size. But I had a moment like that at Authentic, where years ago I had been saying, oh, we have a 18-month sales cycle, because it felt that way to me. I went back and evaluated 3 years of my CRM data and found out that our actual sales cycle for the deals we win is 30 days or less. 30 days or less, which means I don't allow for sandbagging of deals anymore. If it's 45 days old and we're not getting anywhere, it's a closed loss. Like, we don't even need to sit with that anymore, right? So ask the questions of your own data. And if you don't even have the data to answer the questions, start there. Put a CRM in place. I know Sales Acceleration has a lot of, so does Authentic. If you don't have a CRM, you don't have a business. I already did a webinar on that. So go back to the archives to listen to that one.
Well, it's funny, Jennifer. That's what I was going to say. Like, if somebody in the audience is like, I don't know how to see that data, like, that is step number 1, is get a CRM that protects you. It gives you the data and it protects you when you do have turnover, to kind of know, where we've left off with things, and then spend time with your people. I just think that would be my advice for everybody. If you have not been on a call with one of your salespeople, or listened even with your marketer, like how they're, communicating, get in there and do a little bit of the dirty work. And because your coaching can help redirect them if they're off track. And the only way you'll know is if you take some time to listen.
That is so true. Staying close to the actual conversations, right? Before we tee up this next question for our panel, I want to remind our guests that we would love to take some of your questions toward the end of today's conversation. So if you have a question, or a question for any of us individually or for the whole panel, please throw it into the Q&A. I'm watching that. We've got one question there now, but I'd like a few more. So take some time, throw your questions our way. But Mark, I'm coming back to you on the flip side of that. So the last question was, there are people in the audience that aren't ready to engage outside expertise. They need to start somewhere internally. I think we've given them some things to look at. I hope so. But then there are others in the audience that are like, okay, we know we're over our skis. We don't have the right leadership or the right framework to help us move forward. What are some of the indications that maybe they are ready to bring in an outside expert or somebody to come in to fill that seat who has that, been there, done that wisdom?
Yeah, well, that would be sort of my ideal customer profile, right? When I was a fractional chief marketing officer, how do I know somebody is really a good candidate? And I'd look for companies that were under board pressure or owner pressure, where somebody who isn't in the business but still has some responsibility and oversight is saying, guys, you're only growing at 5%. The market's been growing at 10%. What gives, right? I think that there's a lot of sort of momentum and slowdown issues that one can feel, even if you don't know numerically or what's really driving it. You know, I've had business groups that, we had to manage during like the 2008-9 financial crisis. We had our first "oh, woe is me" meeting, right? And because we lost 300 customers in 30 days, they just disappeared. We were in the compliance business. Everybody's like, well, what do we do now? It's like, well, okay. So, the business has been good. We had tailwinds behind us. We're also paid to manage when we've got headwinds, right? So what are we going to do, right? And we came up with a strategy that first of all, we were not going to lose one more customer if we could help it. We started putting longer term subscription plans in place. And, we actually grew 8% during that recession when a lot of our competitors went down 30 or went out of business. So I think you have to have that positive attitude that there is something you can do, right? And we actually came out of that period much better, stronger, with better products and services than we went in, because we were forced to reevaluate. So that discipline of just, stopping and taking an honest view of your business, looking at your market data, your customer data, your competitors, and your internal performance, that's kind of I think the big one, the place to start, right? People say, well, I can't do it in account level P&L. Yes, you can. You just don't want to. I think that's where there's a lot of excuses out there, but I think you have to start with an attitude that there's an opportunity and for growth, profitable growth out there somewhere. You just got to have the discipline to look for it, just in the same way a manufacturer's got great, back office or plant discipline, looking at quality metrics and Six Sigma and whatever. Why don't you apply those same best practices to your sales and marketing operations, right? Because they seem to know how to fix those, but they don't seem to know how to fix the front end of their businesses sometimes.
Mm-hmm. So true. What are the signals for our friends over at Sales Acceleration when you're talking with businesses that end up being right fit clients and they really are ready to take this journey? What are some of the indicators in their business that the readiness is there? I guess I'll just lob that at Tom.
Fair enough. When businesses are struggling, think of that indicator on revenue. It's plateaued or going the other direction. But the business owner and the leadership, they're spread too thin. As we've heard numerous times, they're wearing so many different hats. In that S&B space that, depending on whatever's most urgent, the hat that they're wearing at that particular moment. So they're challenged with bandwidth and really where are they best serving their organization and should they best serve that organization? So there's a bandwidth and there's also then that desire. Do I really want to be in this seat? Is this where I'm happiest? Is this why I started my business to begin with? So as they're looking at trying to create that path for growth, if they're struggling both with a bandwidth and just really a satisfaction and a happiness component of, if I'm doing this, do I really want to do this? And am I best served to do this? That's really that hand to say, maybe I do need some outside perspective, some help to create these things, to create that path of success and get back to why I started my business to begin with.
Yeah, that's so true. I can see that. I can feel that as a business owner who also has a sales background and has, helped build the sales function here at Authentic. I feel that. On the marketing side for Authentic, some of the indications that we see that tend to bring clients to us at a point of readiness to really take the journey is that the CEO and CFO are starting to look at each other and say, we're spending a lot of money on marketing, but we have no idea what it's getting for us. And we've taken a couple running attempts at either hiring agencies and being disenchanted with the outcomes or trying to put together a marketing role that would be the right fit in our business. But if we're honest with ourselves, we honestly don't know the difference between PR and communications and social media and digital. Like we don't know what we're doing here. And so I think when Mark talks about the kinds of attributes that you look for in a relationship that are more of the qualitative, one of the attributes that we look for in a right fit client is that they're humble. They're humble enough to acknowledge that they aren't marketers, which, it's interesting. If you're in marketing, that a lot of people think that they're marketers or that they know marketing. But for the clients that are like really ready to take the journey, they're humble. They're like, we're ready to trust this role to a leader who has the expertise to lead us. And we're willing to let them help inform our expectations, right? They're not expecting marketing to come in 30, 60, 90 days, create an automagical lead gen engine that suddenly solves all their problems, right? It's a journey and there's foundation to be laid. And so those are the kind of indications in a business. And of course, that they are at that critical mass point where they've got a good solution for the market. They have salespeople that have good management, and we're all aligned to take this endeavor together and work closely together. So, well, our audience is being a little more quiet today, although they're still with us. So they're getting some value, I think, by being here. But I want to turn to one of the questions in the room and still invite others to throw any questions you might have into the Q&A. But I think this is an interesting question. This person must be looking at some different opportunities, because he's saying, I'm hearing a lot about right-sizing the amount of responsibilities inside of a sales or marketing role, yet he's seeing a lot of overstuffed jobs on the hunt. Not all of them, but like companies trying to get everything out of one person in one role, right? So how do we fight against this on the front lines? And maybe Kelly, I'll come to you. Like, how do you work with clients on defining the right scope for a sales role and not overstuffing it just because we're small and lean and need everybody to wear all the hats?
Great question. And I would imagine that this person is kind of asking at the leadership role. So they're trying to bring them in as the, VP of sales and marketing. And that can be extremely challenging. So if I was that person looking at opportunities, or even talking with a client about what it is they need, I would be asking what do the teams under them look like? Because that's where it gets really dicey. A selling sales manager doesn't work. You're competing with the sales team. The sales leader that has to be the marketer, and run the sales team doesn't work. And so, not that it can't be done if you have the right staff under you. And then you have the authority and budget to bring in outsourced, resources that can help support you where those gaps exist. One of my favorite types of engagements is when there is a sales leader in the seat, but again, they're kind of struggling. The owner wants to invest in their success, hasn't given up on them. I mean, that's a great chance to come in and work side by side with someone, as you would do with a marketer, right? That's on the team, that's willing to learn and just wants that expertise. But, trying to do both, I would never try to do both things. That's just sort of my advice. There's too much specialty on both sides to be extremely good at either one without having a sort of another layer under you to, execute with those teams.
Absolutely agree. We frequently see and have to work with our clients on their understanding of how we're going to help develop their team and their people to level up, and where those level up connections happen. And I'd point back again to the roadmap, which we will include in the recap here, as to different levels of seniority and expertise that are needed in the different layers. So, we might step in as a fractional CMO, and we are sitting on the leadership team. We are standing toe to toe with the CEO and the CFO and the COO and the head of sales to have respectful debate till we get to alignment, right? We're not yes men and women. We're empowered at that senior level to really align, and in order to get everybody else lined up underneath that. And so even after we've implemented our methodology and coached up, if we step out and the person left is a marketing manager and they're not on the leadership team and they are not empowered to say no to the CFO or to have that respectful pushback, they will drown, right? So there's an important aspect of recognizing that whoever is, leading has to know how to guide everybody else underneath to success so that they aren't drowning, right? So that you're not expecting that person who's still growing in their role to absorb that level of expectation. So it's tough. There's a lot of overstuffing of roles happening out there for sure, trying to stretch people across the entire dimension. And it's harder in a small business where you don't have unlimited resources to bring in every level. So Mark, would you add anything from your experience on how to set teams up and job descriptions up to not be overstuffed?
Well, I think you have to start with what is it you're trying to accomplish first, right? First at the business level, and then you have to organize the marketing function, if you will, the team, the resource allocation, the programs you're going to sponsor around what it is that you're trying to accomplish. And I think when you start that way, it doesn't become an emotional sort of exercise. It becomes a pretty rational exercise. I remember having working at US Bank in Minneapolis, and I was looking for anybody who could show me a competitive analysis that they had done, and the product guys were like, well, that's our responsibility, and the marketing guys were like, well, that's my responsibility. I go, well, somebody show me one, because I've never seen one, right? And, you know, and so it was like, I had to sort that out. I mean, it was an obvious need that we had, right? Everybody wanted to own the responsibility, but nobody did it. So, you know, that's really aligning your priorities. It was pretty important to us at the time that we really understand what was going on in the market. And so, you know, but I think, and then there are, you know, like the pragmatic marketing, if you're familiar with it, it's a system for sort of product and marketing management, started out for technology companies, but it's got a really interesting model and thought process about how you align your marketing resources. And so that there are things out there that you can sort of beg, borrow, and learn from.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, we're coming to the top of our hour, and I don't have any additional questions from the audience for us to field. And we're not going to just fill the airwaves for the sake of filling the airwaves. So we're going to give everybody back a couple minutes in their day. Oh, wait. Well, that was a thank you. You're welcome, James. We answered your question. We're glad we got to take that. So I just want to thank each of you panelists. It's just wonderful to collaborate with you in the work we're doing on behalf of helping companies make breakthrough growth. I love that both of our firms are committed to being a resource and a sounding board for companies, even if they're not going to work with us and our teams. I know Sales Acceleration and Authentic, through events like this and other content, we really want to share the wealth of resources so you all are enabled to take the next steps, whatever that looks like. But if you're ready to talk with someone who can come in and bring that wisdom and experience, we would love to connect with you. And I'm just really grateful to sit around this virtual table with all of you. So thank you, Kelly. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Mark. This has been a really fun conversation, and I'm sure we'll be back for more on other related topics soon. So thank you so much to our attendees. Have an awesome afternoon, and we'll see you next time for another Authentic Growth webinar. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.